when we're talking about prime cores, there's certain rules you need to stick to in terms of bots. And outside of that, then that's where the prime cores come in. So the prime cores are the best cores in the game, hands down. But when it comes to certain bots, they need specific cores. So as a general rule, if you have an air class bot that does damage and an enhanced ordnance core increases that damage, that's a must have for that bot. Generally speaking, 99% of the time, you want an enhanced ordnance on that air class bot. If it does damage, that's the key indicator there. If it does damage. So you would not, for example, put an enhanced ordnance on tracks because it does no damage. Then with gunners, same situation. If the gunner does damage, you want a volatile mixture. So I would say generally those cores have to go on those bots 99% of the time. Very few exceptions. So once you've got all your jets and all your gunners with those cores, then we're going to look at where the prime cores can fit in within your team. And we're going to be talking about which ones are best, which sort of class they suit, not just the best bot. There's no point talking about going this bot because I might be stood here saying that, oh, Quintus goes well on Blaster, but you don't have Blaster. And so you think, oh, well, Quintus is no good for me. No, not the case. So we're going to talk about which bot class to put it on and why, so you can make your own decisions rather than keep asking people going like, oh, what core on this bot? So let's kick it off with Leage. So there is one bad downside for Leage. Other than that, it is an absolutely amazing core. Now the one downside to it is, and it's more relevant when you get to higher levels of the game, granted, is that when you put it on a bot, it hacks the other team's outpost bots once they've used their abilities. So it doesn't hack their ability, don't use their ability back on the base, but once they've used their ability, they re-engage the base and start attacking and helping you. But the problem with that is, if you pop them and they're halfway down the base, they will start to walk towards their own base and drag you with them. So just keep that in mind, that your bots will start to walk away from where they are to sort of chase these bots down to engage them themselves. Outside of that, it's literally like getting 4 extra bots, or 5 at higher level, and you can say 18. It's like getting 4 or 5 extra bots on the battlefield for 15 seconds. Absolutely immense, and obviously protects you from being hacked as well. So although I wouldn't say it's an absolute necessity in your team, it is a very, very good core that you should try and get in your team if you can. Now, I put it on Wheeljack there. That is not a good example. I was doing some testing. I was doing a bit of playing around. If I was putting the age on anything, I would put it on a frontline bot. Not necessarily just a tank, but I would put it on a frontline bot. You're talking warriors and special bots like Optimus Primal, like Pipes, like Rook, like Twin Twist, maybe, unless you've got another core, which we'll talk about later, but a frontline bot. So next up we've got Quintus. So with Quintus, you've got 2 options basically. So the 2 options are, you can either put it on a tank. Now if you put it on a tank, it means you'll get more HP, because the Sharkticons take 20% of your HP and damage for 7 seconds. Now, if you put on a tank, they're going to have really high HP, but low DPS. So they're more of a distraction than for damage. Or you can put it on a high DPS, low HP bot, and then you're getting less HP in the Sharks, but getting more damage. So you can see there, if you want more HP, put it on a frontline tank. The tankier, the better. The higher HP, the better. So you're talking like a warrior, like Rooks or like Pipes. If you want it on a high DPS bot, you can get a lot more damage out of it. Now, personally, I like to put Quintus on a rushing tank. I've tried it on a few bots. And the reason I like to do it on a rushing tank is that when you do a rushing tank normally, once that ability runs out, they can kind of get in a bit of trouble. Where if you put Quintus on them and your bots are still killing things behind, it starts popping out Sharks and it sort of does damage around, it protects him. So I personally like Quintus on frontline rushing warriors like Pipes. There's no right or wrong answer with it. Next up, we've got my Cronus. So with my Cronus, again, a couple of options, depends where you want it. I've seen people put it on healers. I've seen people put it on gunners. I've seen people put it on frontline tanks. And there's no right or wrong answer, but I would try and get Quintus in there. I think Quintus is one of the 3 prime cores I think are essential. I think my Cronus, Quintus, and Alphatron are absolutely essential in your team, and you should never leave without them. Outside of that, you should try and get as many in as possible, but definitely those 3. Now, my Cronus, if you put on the frontline tanks, it'll keep your frontline tanks HP obviously up with the healing. If you put it on gunners, it's better. It's good for gunners because your gunners are low HP, so it heals them and keeps them alive rather than dying. But the problem is, there's not many gunners or airbots that don't need enhanced ordnance or don't need volatile mixture, so it can be hard to get it into those bots without sacrificing an enhanced ordnance or a volatile mixture, which are there for damage and what your gunners are generally there for, and your air class bots. So I don't like my Cronus in that mid section. In essence, that is the perfect place for it because it's right in the middle of your team. And what generally happens is your tanks take damage and your healers run ahead, and they'll be on the same sort of distance as your gunners. But for me, not at the sacrifice of enhanced ordnance or volatile mixtures. So on healers, a good idea. I think that if you lose your healers, it can be an absolute nightmare. But then it's a bit away from your tanks, and you don't get as much healing on your tank. So again, no right or wrong answer with this. Personally, I have my tanks. I think after that, healers are not a bad idea. Because healers struggle for health because they're such low HP. And after that, then gunners, but I'm not a fan. After that, we've got Alchemist. Alchemist, it's alright. It heals you for your attacks. It's a bit like my Cronus in a way, but only heals 1 bot for 15% damage done. I really like this currently on smokescreen on defense. Does really well to heal him while he's attacking. It keeps him alive because it does so much damage. So you can put Alchemist on a high damage bot, but not one that depends on an enhanced ordnance or volatile mixture for damage. I know, bit confusing, but if you're going to put Alchemist on anyone, then I would put it on a high damage bot if you can fit it anywhere. Alphatron, absolute necessity for me. 1 ability point every 8.5 seconds, must have. So if you're going to war, try and put it on a bot that you know you are taking every single battle regardless, unless you're going to start switching cores. But for lower players, I'll put it on a healer. It makes more sense. Your healer's probably going to stay alive for most of the battle. Sit back and just give you them points. But I would not leave home without it. Like I said, one of the best, if not the best for me, best cores in the game. Amalgamous is good on a bot that does high damage when in alt mode. So you're talking the likes of Rotorstorm, you're talking the likes of Sentius. I think it's well fitted for Twin Twist, does really, really well. Because they go into alt mode for a lot longer and do a lot more damage, and it heals them as well. So really, really good core. Just make sure, guys, that it is a bot that transforms into alt mode. I've seen people trying to put this on bots that don't transform, and obviously does not work. So just keep that in mind. So one that transforms for a decent amount of time, because don't forget, if it just transforms and then does damage and transforms back again, it's not going to work. It needs to transform and stay in that mode for quite a while. Laser Optimus is another good example, but you could probably use his G1 for just pretty much very similar. So if you've got Amalgamous and you've got Laser Optimus with his G1, I'll put his G1 Laser Optimus and use Amalgamous somewhere else. But a very, very good core nonetheless. Myself, I put it on defense on Twin Twist. Megatronus, a bit of a weird one. It's an okay core. It's good if you have it on pipes to mix with that acid and fire, because it obviously does enhance damage. But I wouldn't say Megatronus is an essential core. It can be good on a rushing bot. Keep in mind, it doesn't increase the ability damage. So if you put it on Goldfire, for example, he will rush. And when he arrives at the target, it'll increase the damage he does around his area, but not where he's travelled from. So the ability damage doesn't increase, just where he started and where he finishes. So it's only when he's doing his DPS, so to speak. But yeah, can be good in terms of doing damage in an area. Because it does 44% of your DPS in an area. So not a bad core on the whole. Onyx, for me, is probably the worst prime core in the game. It's not the best. It boosts damage, regular attacks while below 40%. But my question is, if your bot's below 40%, you're in trouble. So if this was like 80 or 90%, then I think it'd be really, really good, because it would pretty much boost your damage all the time as your health drops. But it doesn't. If it was, listen, if it was, it activates after your bot drops below 80% and stays for the rest of the battle, I think it'd be absolutely immense core. But the fact it's below 40%, just doesn't make it that good, really. So I honestly would not put Onyx core on anyone, really, unless you haven't got a core to put him on, if that makes sense. So listen, a core is better than no core. That's the point I'm making. But I wouldn't particularly try and fit Onyx in your team at the sacrifice of any other core that you might want. Nexus at lower levels is not really essential. But once you get to higher levels in the game, it becomes more and more essential. Because it obviously buffs your combiner, and gives you damage against combiners. So can be really good against some really hard, high level combiners that have a load and load of HP, especially with the current Prime League war setting where combiners have more HP. But generally, if you're having problems in time against bases, or you're having problems against combiners, it's not a bad core to put in. But I imagine most players at lower levels don't worry about combiners too much. Yeah, they worry about the abilities and negating them, but the actual combiners themselves don't have a lot of HP. So not really essential for lower players as such. Primer is really good on tracks, because tracks is an air class bot, but he can't have an enhanced ordnance because it doesn't do damage. So that's why the likes of Primer is really good on a gunner, or really good on a jet. It's like a support type that doesn't do damage. Primer is also really good because it does 22% extra damage from all sources for 5 seconds. So if you're struggling for time, it can really rip through some bots really effectively. Really probably essential now at higher levels of the game where you want to get through outposts and combiners very quickly. At lower levels, maybe not as important, but again, Trax is such a great bot, and such an important bot in the game, that you sort of look and struggle to decide what core should go on him, because it doesn't do damage at all. But I think that sort of combo of having Primer and Flak and doing extra damage to a range of sources, because don't forget that whatever Primer touches makes it take extra damage. So not just from your bot, from other ones. So if you can put it with Flak, and Flak is touching 2 or 3 bots, or a bot on the defense, they'll all take extra damage. So Primer and Flak, great combination, a really good core for those support type bots. Then we've got Vector. So Vector does what it says on the tin. So whatever bot you put it on, once it dies, it comes back to full health. So it generally gets used on a lot of sack bots, because the downfall of sack is that once you do the sack, you've lost a bot and you start the battle with 1 less bot. But with Vector on, if you time it correctly and it takes a lot of damage very quickly, it means it comes back to the start again and you start the battle with 8 bots. So very, very good core in that sense. Not bad on defense for pesky, really high HP bots, because it makes them come alive again. So it can be a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, not a bad core, not essential, but not a bad core. Then we've got Solus. So Solus, I would say, is probably the second worst of all the cores after Onyx. It adds a little turret, which does extra damage. That's it, basically. So, and again, you wouldn't take it off a bot that needs an enhanced ordnance or a volatile mixture for extra damage. You would just put it maybe on a healer or something, or on a bot that's a support type, just to give you that bit extra damage. But, 15 seconds, every 15 seconds you create a turret for 12 seconds that has 25% of your damage. So 25% damage of whatever bot it is here to there really. It's not that much. So I think that if the cores that probably need a buff in is Onyx and Solus, and the two cores I generally wouldn't use in my team. So on the whole there, like I said, Quintus, my Cronus, and Alpha Triumph, definitely essential cores that you should fit in your team no matter what. Get them in your team. After that, I think you're looking at Amalgamous and Leage, Primer, Nexus. Those are the cores you should try and get in if you can. Don't force them in, but if you can. I think Alchemist, I think Megatronus, and I think Vector have their uses in certain situations, but not generally essential. And then Onyx and Solus, forget about it. Don't bother, guys. But I hope this guide sort of helped you a bit to understand not just what the cores do, but which sort of bots you can put them on so you can try and fit them in your team. Maybe what cores not to take off and which cores to keep in your team, and not change them for a prime core. And not just to try and just fit all the prime cores in wherever they can go, but actually put them on a bot it actually suits and makes sense to try and get the best results out of your teams or out of your war team or whatever it may be. So I hope that's helped you. If it's helped you in any way, let me know in the comments. If you use these cores a different way than I've listed, then let me know in the comments as well. Good luck, and I hope it helps.